Do you or someone you know struggle with feelings of being too independent, or at the other end of the spectrum, feelings of being overly independent? It's actually quite common to struggle with finding that ideal balance between these two poles, the poles of feeling either enmeshed or hyper independent. Given our society's tendency to foster that ideal of independence or even hyper-independence, many individuals, couples, and families struggle with discovering that ideal level of flowing interdependence, that beautiful sense of being connected yet autonomous that fosters the safety that we need and the ability to individuate, bloom, and grow as individuals. Today, we'll focus on this listener's real life question. I'm in an exclusive relationship with a great partner, but we have a lot of friction around what he calls my overly dependent and enmeshed relationship with my family. I was born in the Philippines, where family connections tend to be very strong and supportive. I talk to my sisters daily and see my parents on weekends. I don't think this is a problem. Do you? And with that question as the focus of today's episode, I'm Dr. Carla Maria Manly, and this is Imperfect Love. Please note, this episode may contain sensitive information. Listener discretion is advised. If you need support, please see the special links in the show notes.
Welcome to Imperfect Love with Dr. Carla Marie Manly, psychologist, author, and relationship expert. I'm here to help unravel mysteries and misconceptions about love, relationships, and mental health issues, plus everything in between. Love is complicated, people are not perfect, and relationships surely can be tough. Together, we'll navigate this messy, imperfect space of real life.
Today, I'm joined by a very special guest, Manami Yamamoto. Manami will be sharing her expertise on the balance between dependence and interdependence. Manami is a licensed marriage and family therapist. She is the founder and president of Blue Humming Therapy, as well as the founder and president of the Mental Health Environmental Change Project, a U.S. and Japan hybrid. Welcome to the podcast, Manami. It is such a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
It's wonderful to connect with you. Before we launch into the topic of today, could you tell our listeners just a little bit about what makes you you?
Yes, thank you so much. So I'm Manami, and then I am a psychotherapist. And then so I pretty much enjoy being myself. So I like nature. I like my two cats. I like music and art. So that's me. But also I'm part of like bigger than me, like culture. I'm Asian, a woman. So it's, part of the nature too. So I'm kind of like a combination of myself and also the bigger than me. So that's me.
That is an exquisite description. Thank you. I've never heard someone say that, and I'm following you. That sense that yes, you're there, you're a mom, you're doing your work, you're lighting the world for others, and that makes you a part of this bigger world of nature and humanity and beyond that. So thank you. Now, you're a psychotherapist. You're also from Asia and have a lot of connections and really working to support mental health and wellness globally. And you're a perfect fit for this ongoing issue of interdependence that we see in particularly in American society, where we are raised to believe that we should be independent, that once we're 18 we leave the home and we're out and we're making our way, and if you return home there's something wrong with you, there's this failure to launch or a failure to be independent, where our ancestors lived in communities where there were 3 generations, 4 generations in a household at one time, and the many benefits of that. I really have to give a shout out to the benefits. You didn't have to farm out childcare. Grandma was there, great grandma was there. You didn't have to farm out your elders to care facilities because there was this beautiful cycle of life and cycle of caring. You cared for the little ones, and then as people became older, and this is part of what cultures have known since, there was man on the planet, woman on the planet. So, can you tell me a little bit about your thoughts? First, about the hyper individualistic society that we live in now. Could you set the stage, Manami, for some of these definitions so our listeners can start getting in this flow with us?
Yes, thank you. So, individualistic, so that's the very difficult word to think about because I came to the US when I was 19, but until that time, so I wasn't sure what is the individualistic and what is the interdependence. So when I was in Japan, I'm originally from Japan. So when I was in Japan, I never thought about interdependent or like codependency or enmeshment. I never thought about that because it was pretty normal in that culture. But after I came to the US, I realized, oh, maybe this is a little different. So it seems like people more focus on themselves. So that's individualistic. So until that time, I never thought about, oh, I was growing up in the interdependent culture. And then, so this is the time. So I also thought about, oh, I have a right to think about what is the, happiest things for just for myself. So that's the kind of start of thinking about individualistic. So sometimes people use that word is more like a selfish, in some cultural sense, people think about individualistic is more selfish, especially in the Asian culture. But this is a time, so I start thinking, oh, it's not just the selfish, it's more like how we can maximize own individual happiness. So that's the definition of individualistic.
Thank you for adding clarity to that. And thank you for also setting it apart very clearly from being selfish. We can be individualistic and still consider others. We do tend to be more self-focused, and we can see even in very collectivistic cultures, there are people within those cultures who are very selfish. So differentiating those terms is so important. Let's also talk for a moment about, and I love that the question of the day, used this term that's often thrown around, enmeshment. Would you describe enmeshment, please?
Yes. So enmeshment is also it was a new word at a time, long time ago. Yes. But so it's like enmeshment, it's like we overly dependent each other. And then the key is like we feel emotional struggle because of that. So sometimes like, we talk about the boundary between two people or more people. But when we have a very different respectful personal boundary. So when for example family members cross the boundaries, so people start feeling a little uncomfortable or stressed. So enmeshment is kind of like we need to figure out, so what is the healthy boundary yourself and the others. And then I think we can call it enmeshment sometimes, but like a tolerance of codependency is very different. So I bring it up like Asian culture because they're like a tolerance level of like, codependent is actually higher than more like an individualistic culture. So we really need to figure out like what is the healthy boundary for that specific family or couple. So we cannot just label somebody, oh, you are enmeshed. So that's my understanding about enmeshment and what is the healthy boundary.
Thank you for that clarity. And so, for our listeners who might have heard the term enmeshment, we do use it, as Manami said, to indicate that there is emotional distress, some sense of being hampered. That needs to be present, and that's different for every individual, different for every family and every relationship. Some people like a really connective, and some might call it hyper-connective relationship. But if that feels good to both people and it's not harming them in any way and it's helping them, then that's perfect for them. Other people do much better having more distance, and as long as they're high functioning and they're healthy, then that's okay. We want to be looking at, in all of these things, is there dysfunction? Is there emotional distress on the part of any person in that system? And could you talk a little bit about codependence? I know we're getting some of the definitions out of the way, and that's a word that I tend to steer clear of in some ways, because in American society, we use codependency as though it's, coins that we're scattering on the ground. It's just easy to throw it out there. And I I have my own way of using codependency. How do you use codependency, Manami?
Yes, so actually, like, I don't really like the word codependent because for some reason, yeah, because I believe like a human actually need to codependent, but in a like a psychological term, so we use that word in negative way. So maybe like somebody can, create a new word for that. So yes, we need to codependent, but too much codependent is so difficult. So more like a co-support or like a mutual support can be the right word. So yes, so yeah, word itself I don't like that much, but like the codependence, like more helping each other to like sustain their life. So
Okay.
mhm.
Let's for this podcast, let's use your new term, co-support.
Yeah,
Let's use
co-support is better.
co-support. I think that's beautiful. And I will, just for the sake of this podcast, use codependency in a very discreet fashion to say, we'll talk, if we talk about codependency at all, because it has so many permutations and meanings depending upon where you are, we'll just relegate it to mean only supporting someone in a negative behavior. So if somebody wants cocaine and you support them somehow in getting that cocaine, or ignore the cocaine, or so that you benefit, we'll keep it over there. That's codependency. We'll generally stay with co-support in this podcast, because I
Thank
think
you.
that's a lovely energy.
Yeah, thank
Okay.
you.
So when we think about this listener's question, the individual is from the Philippines. I don't know, the gender of the individual. The individual has a male partner. The male partner is saying you are enmeshed and too connected to your family. Yet this individual sounds like they are very much enjoying talking to sisters, seeing parents on the weekend, that it's part of their culture. The individual's from the Philippines, and again, from the people I know who are Filipino, they do tend to have very lovely, connected, highly supportive family dynamics. So, what do you think about this question, and what would you say about whether or not it's too dependent?
Yes, that's very difficult questions because I think everybody is coming from different backgrounds. So one of the partners think, oh, so this person is codependent or enmeshed. But for other people, so that's the normal in that cultural sense, in the family structure. So that's normal. So we usually don't start from that point. It's more like a try to understand where this person is coming from. And that I navigate my clients that way because when it's normal for some people, like maybe it was a little bit codependent and mesh, but this is the way like a family and a culture survive. But if somebody tell you, oh, you enmesh, you're codependent, then that person will get hurt. Oh, this was the way I, live my life. But somebody say, oh, that's like a symptom, that's a problem. So that's not going anywhere. So that's why I usually don't go that direction, more understanding where it's coming from and what's the difference. And we just acknowledge that. So that's the first point I start with my clients.
Thank you. And we can see so let's just pause on the acknowledgement to acknowledge that this co-supportive, more dependent than the partner might have been raised to be, but this is working for this individual who wrote in. So for the partner to be able to acknowledge, wait, this is the culture, this is what's normal. It's not putting this person in a state of distress. There aren't any negative behaviors coming from it that we can tell. It sounds more as if it's something that the partner's not familiar with.
Right.
And through the lens of a hyper-independent American society, it may seem enmeshed, it may seem too co-supportive, but it is actually, for this individual, healthy, connective, and it feels right. And that's that sweet spot, correct?
Yes, that's correct. And I really want everyone to know, like we have a lot of blind spot, and then we have some reaction to something unknown. So we can be judgmental, we can criticize others if we meet something we don't know. So that's coming from fear. So that's the stuff points we need to be aware that okay, we have a blind spot, we can be reactive, to meet something unknown.
So this sounds to me, Manami, thank you for this blind spot piece because it sounds as if it's part two. The acknowledgement that there's a difference here, difference in culture, difference in needs, whatever it might be, difference in family systems. So step two then is to go into one of my favorite areas, which is fear. What's the fear? And when I think of my first book, Joy from Fear, it's the way we get to joy is by looking at what are the fears. What are the unrealistic fears? So then we can see that perhaps when I think of what you said, look at the blind spots. This is an unfamiliar situation. The partner's not familiar with this culture. It seems odd, it seems strange, so it's the partner's reacting. So if the partner can be supported, whether through going back and forth the with the person that he's in the relationship with, or going to therapy or partner therapy, might be able to see what are my fears around this? What is making me have such a hard time with my partner's healthy, for them, connection to their family?
Yes. So usually, like people don't want to feel fear. So they want to control everything. But as you said, when we aware like on fear and then we work as a couple to process, and then at the end, so we can find the joy. So, but like, we cannot just lose, we cannot just drop the fear. Fear is there. But it's okay. Like, we can acknowledge there is a fear, but it doesn't take over you. It doesn't take over the family. That's okay. It's part of our emotion, but it's there.
I agree because fear is one of our 5 core emotions. Fear, disgust, sadness, joy, anger. They're all there for a reason. They're just messengers if we learn to slow down and, as you said, not be controlled by them. But if the partner is able to, and I so appreciate that you said, work as a couple to process the situation. Sometimes easier said than done, but for the partner to be able, for the person who wrote in to be able to express that this feels right, it feels good, it feels connective, I'm able to do all my other tasks in life, I'm not held hostage by these people, this feels good to me. And to be able to ask the partner, what are your fears here? Are you worried that, I won't be able to create a family with you? Are you worried that you don't see me enough? Are you worried that I won't grow and individuate and blossom as much as I could in life? So when we learn to have conversations, even sometimes they bring up anxiety. I mean, conversations about our emotions can make us anxious. So what you're saying is the couple can come together and process because relationships are imperfect. Love is imperfect. Two people are not going to be the same cookie cutter images of each other. So when these things come up, it's a chance to create more understanding.
Yes, that's right. Yes. So when, couple can acknowledge, fear or other feelings, but if they can accept, like, your partner's vulnerability and try to understand the emotion each other, then we can like unfold as a couple. So yes, that's the like beauty of the couple therapy.
I'm a strong believer in couples therapy. It's one of my favorite types of work
Mhm.
because we can see that if you have two people who are willing to come to work, to be vulnerable, not to blame, but learn to be more and more curious.
Yes.
And that non judgmental curiosity is the key to coming into true intimacy with another person.
Yes, I'm so glad you mentioned about intimacy. Yes, that's the way to have an intimacy. Yes, the process is necessary to have more intimacy.
I recall a long time ago when I was in therapy, the woman said, intimacy is into me I see. And I said, yes. And it was an epiphany. And then I thought, and yes, intimacy is also into you I see. When we're with so first we need to be able to go into me I see, and then to be able to have the patience and willingness and the openness to go into our partner, whoever it is, a romantic partner, a friend, a child, and be able to go and see into them as well and not make it right or wrong or good or bad. It may be different. It may be uncomfortable. And the other piece that I really like about this kind of work is then we learn when we're willing to get out of our own sphere, our own headspace, that independence is right. And these other family system where people are way too connected and that's not familiar and it's got to be wrong. That keeps us really stuck anytime we're in that dichotomy of good, bad, right, wrong.
Yeah, we like to judge like a right or wrong, so it's very black and white, but it's not like that. It's not like that. We need all elements to, live as a human being and for the, couple, for the family. So that's why we talking about so what is the like a best balance for each couple, each family. And it can be different from everybody, but so family or couple, they can find the best balance for them. And so that's the process we are doing through the couples therapy or family therapy.
Again, I so appreciate you bringing up another word that's so key, which is balance. Because if we imagine for this partner, if he's seeing this individual always on the phone, from his perspective, always on the phone with the sisters, with the parents every weekend, he may feel like it's out of balance, like he's not getting enough time with the partner. And if that's the case, that back and forth in couples therapy, or even without a therapist, if they can do the work together,
Mhm.
to find, okay, maybe the partner does need to pull back slightly if there is insufficient time for him. But again, it's not that the family setup is bad. It might be that this partner needs more tender loving care, more couple time, more one-on-one activities. And that too is okay, but it is that process of finding balance, going into what are your needs, what are your fears.
Yes. So when people talk about the balance, so when I work with my clients, I usually tell them, so I understand they want to find a balance right away, but balance is not something you can find right away. So as we talk, we acknowledge each other, we work together, we understand each other, and we continue that process over and over. And finally, we find a balance. So people, something sometimes people get wrong. So yes, I want to find a balance. Please help me. But it's not like that. So we are human beings. We need that process over and over. And then so we find a balance at the end. But this process is sometimes painful, stressful. So that's why people come to therapy. Yes, so third person or professional can help, those process because it's a painful process sometimes.
Thank you, Manami, for bringing up that piece because we live, in fact, the world itself is becoming more like this, but America is a lot at the forefront of the idea of everything is a quick fix. People are disposable. We should be able to pop a pill, get a new outfit, do this, do that, and that will cure everything. And the truth is that if you prize self work, if you prize personal development, that's where we do see that we must be very patient with ourselves and with others as we grow and change, not allowing abuse or destructive behaviors while we're doing that, but really realizing that we are the product of somewhat our genetics, somewhat our environment, our relationships, all those things that bring us to where we are at this moment. And if a person's 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, however many decades they've been on the planet, that's how many decades their brain has been wired to behave in certain ways. And so if we're shifting to another realm, that's going to take a lot of work to find a new balance because our old, what we might have called balance, that old homeostasis, which may not have really been balance, but it was homeostasis, it if we are changing and getting out of something that didn't work for us, we must be patient with ourselves. And as you say, try again and again and again. And it is a slow turning, but it's one of the most beautiful parts of being a psychotherapist is watching people come in and they may not see their changes. But you and I have the blessing and the joy of watching that evolution and being present with those painful parts. And it is often difficult when you're working with couples because they are in great pain. And as a psychotherapist, you can't fix it. You can guide, you can be there, you can create that space and be a guide. But there is often in individual therapy and couple therapy and family therapy, there's often pain because I believe, I'd like your opinion on this. I think the pain comes from moving out of the dysfunctional behaviors, the dysfunctional patterns from the past that feel familiar. They feel safe. They feel comfortably uncomfortable, but it takes it's and also sometimes during these changes, there's also healing or acknowledgement of old trauma that's been stuck. And as people work through those pieces of trauma that may be well below their conscious awareness, that causes pain. Unprocessed grief, unprocessed trauma, all of these things that actually that might be part of, we don't know anything about the partner, but the partner may indeed be holding on to some old pieces of trauma or pain, maybe about a family that wasn't close and connected. And this partner is bringing that up like, oh, unconsciously, I wish I had such a close family. I wish I had a mom and dad and sisters that cared about me that much. We don't know. But that's what comes out in therapy if the partners are willing to do the work.
Yes. And then for everyone, like a change is oftentimes very scary, painful, stress. And then as we talk, sometimes like a change needs a patient too. But because of that stress and then fear, people want a quick change. But so I was thinking how people can be patient and feel okay about that transition. And then, so instead of like we pretty much try to focus on how to be quick change, a quick fix, but more like I start navigating my clients to focus on more humanity. Yes, like we are not perfect, we are vulnerable, we cannot change that fast, but that's okay. That's part of human being. So kind of like, navigating people to that direction and feeling more love and compassion for, our imperfection as human being. So that's kind of helping many people. They can be patient and then they feel okay about the change, even they feel scared or they feel like a stress about the change.
Absolutely. And normalizing, because often when people are in therapy and they're beginning to shift, and it does feel uncomfortable, and
Mhm.
sometimes you can't wait to go to that next session, and sometimes you don't want to go to that next session because
Right.
it's really scary and it was, but it's so important because it's my belief that one of the reasons we are here on the planet is to become our best selves, not to accrue this and that. I mean, that's so temporary. But if we can find, what's the reason I wrote my fourth book, The Joy of Imperfect Love, if we can find out how to love ourselves and love others truly and deeply where they are at, continuing to evolve in our relationships, all of them, romantic, family, friendships, work relationships. To me, that's the gift of life. The ability we have the privilege to evolve rather than seeing therapy as a big scary monster. If we see therapy, whether we're doing it with ourselves, if we're able to do that, or doing it with a professional, or doing it with a book, what a privilege that we have the gift of neuroplasticity, that we can actually change our brains. We can change our lives. We can change our relationships. It doesn't matter how old we are, we can still do this. And I think sometimes people don't see it as a privilege. They see it as oh, I have to, do this. Instead, we don't think too much about having to put work into baking or going to our job or, working on a garden or hobby, but they all take work. Wouldn't we want to work on this beautiful thing called the self and these beautiful things called our relationships?
Yeah. Well, I really like you said the privilege. It's privilege as a human being, right? So
Mm.
yeah, so we can grow as a human, we can change what we want to. It takes time, but we have that power to change. So yes, that's a privilege.
And I think it's really beautiful when we think of we have however many decades, days we're on the planet. If we see this work on the self and within our relationships, going into the listener's question again, if they don't make it a right wrong thing, but let me understand more about your inner world and what your needs are. And I'll tell you more about my inner world and what my needs are. And the partner who is saying there's enmeshment and the partner who's saying, but I love my family, this is the way it is. Maybe they can come to a place where they create that balance that allows them both to enjoy the beauty of interdependence, that sweet spot of where I call it's I think you and I might have at some point in the past talked about this, but in The Joy of Imperfect Love, I talk about the four styles of relationships. The very entangled one, where people are like a very tightly knit braid, and then the interdependent, where they're flowing in and out of each other's lives. They're okay apart, but they really want to come back together and connect. And there's this beautiful loose weave. And then the third style where it's two train tracks and the people kind of see each other. They're more like roommates and they're chugging along and it's working for them, but they might feel very disconnected. And then the divergent style where you have these two rails going off in different directions where the people really don't know each other in an intimate way at all and often don't connect. And that would be the really hyper independent. And what you and I, it sounds like we're very much on the same page of that interdependence which will look different for every person, for every couple, for every family. But if we create that interdependence, that flow, it naturally allows each person to have their required level of freedom and autonomy, but they're not running away from the intimacy. They want to come back to that intimacy. How do you see, that's kind of my version of interdependence. How do you define interdependence?
Yes, so interdependent is the very difficult word for everyone. But like you say, it's kind of like it's not just the one single, structure for whole life. It's more like a dancing, like a, moving sometimes different type of relationship the couple needs or family needs. And then based on your life transition, so you might need a different type of interaction. So it's more like just the dancing, and then we need to update like almost like every year, like a version 2024, 2025. And you really need to think about what is the best healthy interaction relationship based on your life stage, based on your relationship with your partner. If you have a family like a children, you might have a different relationship as well. So I really want everyone to think about what is the best relationship, best connection with my partner at this point here and now. So it's not just the one single stuff for forever. So I really want to remind everyone to think about.
I'd love to restate what you said because it's so brilliant. And what I took away from that, that your definition of interdependence is a unique dance based upon the individual's needs. their life stage, and the relationship itself.
Yes.
Oh, that's beautiful, Manami. That is so beautiful. And I know we're wrapping up a bit toward the end of our time together, which I could talk to you about these topics for a very long time. But I don't want to miss the opportunity to dive into for a bit on a very important piece you mentioned early on, the importance of boundaries. And boundaries, that word is used so much now, and people use it sometimes in healthy ways, sometimes in ways that aren't appropriate. And the way I see boundaries are as kind of like this fence. We have this home of our being. And for some people, we don't need a fence. They just are able, they respect us, we have a good relationship, so they can come in and out of our home, and we have this beautiful flow. For some people, we need a white picket fence where it's like, okay, stop. You can see through, but it's a little more structured. For some people, that white picket fence needs a lock on it. And then for some people who don't really respect our boundaries,
Mhm.
they need a concrete wall. Like that wall, you're not coming through. No. And so, of course, different boundaries depending upon the situation, and a lot of flow depending upon what the person needs. And so when we look at healthy boundaries, we can see that depending upon the people in the relationship, the boundaries may be very porous, very fluid. In other situations, the boundaries may need to be very strong and fixed. And what we want to look for is whether or not the people on both sides feel safe, seen, and heard. How would you describe boundaries in your unique way?
Yes. So first, I want to tell everyone, everybody struggle about the boundary. I never met the people who, who don't feel like stressed about the boundary. Everybody struggle the boundary. So that's actually the difficult one. And I was starting from there, but I really want everybody to talk to yourself. So what's my comfortability in this relationship? So you know your boundary, you understand your partner's boundary, and then from there, so couple create the new boundary as a couple. So don't push like, to my way or his way. So couple try to create something in the middle. It works for both of you. So that's kind of like a process we need to clarify. So what kind of boundary we need to sustain this relationship. So that's the thing, like we can walk around the boundary. And then people have a very different sense of boundary. As I said, some people are okay, more like, easy like a boundary. Some people have more rigid boundary. So we really need to understand where your partner is coming from. What's your partner's boundary? What's your boundary? Then we can co-create the new boundary for both of you.
One of my favorite words, co-creation. When we stop using the right, wrong, good, bad, and look at it, let's co-create something. And I think a common example of that in relationships, often one partner might be really okay with family just stopping by unannounced. And the other, because that's part of their culture, the way
Mhm.
they were raised, their personal comfort level, and the other partner might be, no, you call first. You have people call and see if it's a convenient time for family, for friends, for anyone. And so that might be something that's a really good example of being able to say, well, my boundary is more that I tend to be private. So if when I'm home, if you could make sure your family calls first.
Mhm.
And when you're home by yourself, if you're okay with them coming, that would be okay. So working on that co-creation so that both people feel respected, safe, seen, and realizing that our boundaries change depending upon the relationship, depending upon the situation within that relationship, and your work boundaries are almost necessarily a lot more inflexible. I mean, you might not be telling people at work the things you're going to be telling your best friend or your partner. And so we want to realize that our boundaries are intended to move based on the situation, but always moving them mindfully and holding on to them mindfully, letting other people know what our boundaries are, not expecting them to know, and working in that way, I think helps. What do you think of that, Manami?
Yes, I totally agree with you. Yeah, I really appreciate so you kind of like, helping us to, yes, like we can go that direction. That it's okay. So I really appreciate you giving that message to me and to the audience right now. Yes, it's okay. We can move forward like that. So yeah.
Thank you. And I was just thinking how important it is for us to realize that the reason boundaries, one of the biggest reasons they're there, is so that we feel safe and secure. So the more someone has earned our trust, heavy emphasis under earned, because trust is earned. Sometimes we give the keys to our home, to the home of the self,
Mm.
too soon. Sometimes we are so afraid we don't give them to somebody who's even earned our trust. But that's the art of healthy boundaries, is having people earn our trust. And once trust is earned, being able to have that ability to be vulnerable and trusting so that the relationship can have that beautiful foundation of safety and security and imperfect love.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Manami, are there any other pieces you'd like to share with us today?
Yes, so we talk about like many things, balance, boundary, independent, interdependent. So we all needed to have a relationship with somebody. And then it's a lot, but we can work together. You can work with your partner. You can work with the family. You can work with a professional like us. So you are not alone. You have a lot of supporters. So I want to tell everyone, so you are not alone. And it might be hard, but you can see like a joy and a happiness at the end after this process. So, and we are very, very happy to support you. So this is a message I want to share with everyone today.
Thank you for that key reminder. That Thank you, Manami. It's so important for us to spread that word and for our listeners to know you truly, it's why people like Manami and I do what we do. We want others to know you are not alone. There are resources, there is support. Sometimes when you feel stressed and alone, it's difficult to find them, but that's what mental health professionals are here to do, to spread the word that you are not alone, that you can find the change, the connection, and the healthy interdependence and the love that you deserve.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Manami, for your time, for your wisdom, for your very gentle and compassionate way of being. I'm very, very grateful to have shared time with you today. Where can our listeners find you?
Yes, so I have a website and also some SNS, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So if somebody is interested, so please come to my website to see how I'm working with community and the clients. But thank you so much. I had a really great time to talk with you, Cara. So I really appreciate you having me in this podcast. Thank you so much.
I've had such a delightful time with you and our listeners. Manami is spelled Manami. Her last name is Yamamoto, Yamamoto, and you can find her at Blue Humming Therapy. And you can also find her, she's the president again of Mental Health Environmental Change Project. That's the US Japan hybrid. And so, again, thank you, Manami. I'm just so grateful. And to our listeners, I am so grateful to you for tuning in, for sharing your time and your energy with us today. And this is imperfect love.
Thanks so much for sharing your time with me today. Remember, you have the power to transform your life and love fearlessly, if imperfectly, and it's my privilege to help you along the way. You can find more life-changing content, including my books and other podcast episodes, at drcarlamanly.com. Feel free to submit your own confidential questions through my website. I'll do my very best to include your issue on a future episode. If you found this podcast helpful, please subscribe and leave a review. Until we connect again, this is Dr. Carla Marie Manly wishing you oceans of blessings and love. Please note, this podcast is psychoeducational in nature and is not intended to replace formal mental health support. Please contact your healthcare provider or emergency hotline if you need psychiatric care. And as always, please take good care of your amazing, wonderful self.